the chairman of the whole committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Whitson, before you got what Mr. Johnson described as high-paying job as Senior Director of Federal Affairs Foundation for Government Accountability, you worked in the FBI, is that right?
Yes.
10 years in the FBI?
Yes.
And prior to that, you were in the United States Army?
Yes, sir.
300 combat missions in Iraq, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And your time at the FBI, you were special agent in the Directorate, supervisory special agent in the Directorate of Intelligence. Is that accurate?
Yes, Chairman.
In your testimony, and I just want to get you familiar with this subject matter, in your testimony you said one of the ways we can eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse is including the overspending on confidential human sources. You said that in your testimony, right?
Yes, Chairman.
Are you familiar with the Inspector General's report about the confidential human sources who were there on January 6, 2021 here at the Capitol? Have you read the report?
I haven't read that closely.
Well, let me tell you a few things that they say in there, and I want to ask you a few questions. He said there were 26 confidential human sources there at the Capitol that day. Does that surprise you?
No.
Doesn't surprise you. Okay. He said 17 of those 26 confidential human sources entered restricted space they weren't allowed to go into. Does that surprise you?
No.
Doesn't surprise you. They did things they weren't allowed to do.
Well, I need more details about, so were they doing it on their own? Were they told to do it? Were they, that kind of thing?
We want to know the answers to those questions too.
Yes, sir.
4 of them went inside the Capitol, and 2 of the 4 who went inside the Capitol were specifically asked by the FBI to be there that day for this. Does that surprise you?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
But I need to know more facts.
And does it surprise you that any of them, none of these individuals, to our knowledge, were charged with anything?
No, I mean, if they were tasked to be there.
Okay.
I would need more information.
Okay, well, in your testimony, you talked about overspending on confidential human sources. Do you believe, is it likely these 26 were being paid by the FBI at the time they were doing this?
I think that's, if they are a confidential human source that's actually on the books, then it's highly likely that they were paid.
Highly likely they're being paid.
If they were tasked to do that.
Even if they weren't specifically asked to be there that day? You think there's likely they were paid?
So if they weren't asked to be there, I think usually they're giving us like a lump payment periodically, so it wouldn't be for a specific tasking necessarily. It'd be hard to answer that.
Are you familiar with what was released here earlier this week, the text communications between FBI agents regarding October 14th, 2020 New York Post story on the Hunter Biden laptop? Have you had a chance to review those?
I haven't seen those text messages.
Well, let me just read a couple to you here. It says, nobody on the call is authorized to comment on the New York Post story. Twitter is treating this as disinformation. I just want to read something that took place earlier that day. The way this day worked is the story came out. That day, Elvis Chan, a guy with the FBI, is meeting with the tech company, something he did on a regular basis in the run-up to the 2020 presidential election. At that meeting, someone asked, hey, there's this New York Post story. Is the laptop real? And we know this took place because we deposed Mr. Brady Olson, and he gave us this information. And he said, when that question was asked, the response was, yes, the laptop is real. Then we get these text messages, which we didn't have before, we just got them this week, these text messages which relate what happens after that. So the FBI has confirmed to Twitter at a FITF meeting on October 14th that the laptop is real. And then we have these text messages back and forth where they says no one is authorized to comment further. Twitter is treating this as disinformation. You find that troubling that the FBI knew something was real, confirmed it at a meeting, then changed their story and went to no comment, no further comment, and allowed the tech companies to run with the idea that this story was disinformation?
Yeah, I do think that's problematic, and I do think the relationships that they tried to build with members of the FBI with these other organizations were problematic.
Yeah, and the ranking member said, oh, the Republicans want to say the FBI was political. And what really wasn't the case. If this is not political, I do not know what is. Because this was the whole basis for the 51 former intel officials doing their letter. And the FBI knew, now we have written evidence they knew, coupled with the deposition we took before where they admitted this. And then later in the day when they're meeting with other tech companies, they go with no comment. And they even admit here, Twitter is running with the disinformation story, even before the 51 intel officials come out with their letter, which is baloney. They're running with that, and the FBI was part of fostering and promoting that story.
It's unacceptable.
Totally unacceptable.
And it shows how one bad apple, and there were probably others, but you can see how much of a problem that is, and that one bad apple behaves that way, the entire Bureau's reputation is impacted. Yeah. Trust is lost across the country, and so that's why it's so important to find folks like that, going back to the entrenched bureaucrats. You have to find them and remove them because that's all it takes is one bad apple.
I think that was point one in your testimony, which is exactly what Ms. Bondi and Mr. Patel are doing, is getting rid of those individuals who foster this kind of political environment where you're going after your political foes, where you're telling things, saying things, allowing things to be believed that aren't accurate when you knew the truth all along.
That's right.
I yield back.